r/AskReddit. Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what is the most insane, evil, funny, dumb way a spouse has tried to screw the other? Had a client whose wife wanted him out of the house. I told him not to leave, just move to a different bedroom for the time being because once he was out the chances of him ever getting back in were slim. He texted his wife and told her he was staying in the house. She called back and left a voicemail that she wanted him out and if he wasn't out soon, she would start taking out her unhappiness on the children, and would remind the children that mommy was being mean to them because daddy wouldn't leave. 101 on how to lose custody. My client's spouse accused him of giving his deceased wife cancer. I represented a guy who was on his second marriage. His first wife passed away from cancer. He and his kids were obviously devastated. My client was a pretty sensitive guy with a big heart. His second wife could be very charming, which was why he fell for her, but it was all a facade. Anyway, to make a long story about a lengthy divorce short, my client met a very kind and affectionate woman during his case. They really hit it off and were basically engaged, even though his divorce was far from over. The fiancé started having health problems and was diagnosed with a form of terminal cancer. Somehow the second wife found out about this and tried to use the cancer diagnosis against my client in court. She developed this crazy theory that my client had killed his first wife by giving her cancer and that he was doing the same thing to his fiancée. The second wife's attorney, who was quite good, refused to be a party to it. The attorney never addressed the argument in court and didn't even ask the second wife any questions about it during testimony. Rather, the attorney informed the judge that the second wife wished to address the court directly about an issue. The judge allowed her to do so, in a highly irregular move. The second wife told her crazy conspiracy theory to the judge, adding that she was certain my client had tried to give her cancer at some point as well. I wish I had an artist's rendering of the scene, capturing the second wife's crazy eyes, her attorney's look of shame/embarrassment, the judge's look of confusion/ennui, and my look of awe-inspired disgust. Divorce lawyer here. Spouse had been out of the house for weeks. She waited until he was on a business trip, came into the house, turned on all of the faucets, plugged the drains, turned off the furnace, and left. It was -10 degrees. He came back 5 days later. The house was ruined. The water froze and cracked the foundation. Paralegal for a divorce lawyer here. Our client told us he didn't clear out the marital account after the parties filed. Which technically is true, because while he removed $45,000 he left about $3.50 in there. This one hits close to home because it happened between my parents. We had a family friend who was a lawyer and my parents agreed that he would be the lawyer for both of them as a mediator. So, as the assets were being divided, my dad got absolutely slammed. She was going to get the house, cars, half his retirement, and an insane amount of alimony. To the tune of like $2,500 a month for the rest of her life. My dad has a good job as a municipal employee, but that was probably 70%-ish of his paycheck. Turns out that my mom and the family friend actually conspired to rip my dad off and make it seem like that's what a divorce settlement looks like. And she was going to kick back more money under the table after the dust had settled. Dad just didn't know how these things worked. So, after some convincing, he finally went out and got his own lawyer. He got a very fair divorce settlement after that. Mom still to this day can understand why we don't talk to her much. That other attorney could be disbarred for that. She accused her ex-husband of sexually molesting their children while under the watchful eye of the nationally endorsed social workers who oversaw his contact with them, which was only required because he didn't have his own private accommodation at the time. She also said that his Indian flatmates were inherently dirty. After the obviously false child molestation suggestion, I warned her of the consequences of being caught lying about that, i.e. permanent loss of custody. She fired me but kept calling back using fake names to try and obtain free advice which contradicted my advice, but everyone she called immediately spotted her. This was a long time ago and now I specialize in insurance litigation, which is far less ugly. How about a wholesome, insane one? Ian Al, but this was told to me by my mom regarding the divorce she got from my dad. They couldn't settle on an alimony amount. Mom and her lawyer came in with a number, Dad countered with a number. They couldn't agree. Because my dad thought my mom should get twice the amount in alimony she was asking for and my mom didn't want my dad to give her that much money for a month. It took months for them to settle on a figure that appeased both of them. Even then, my mom puts aside the extra above what she wanted in case my dad ever has a financial emergency and my dad puts aside the extra she didn't want in case my mom ever has a financial emergency. The funny thing is, they don't know the other is putting the money aside for the other. My mom told me about her emergency stash and my dad told my brother about his emergency stash. Bro and I discussed it while talking about what nut jobs our parents are. Edit. I've gotten a lot of support for this response, thank you. I'm not going to say that their divorce was perfect, it wasn't. There were still some hurt feelings and resentment from all parties involved. However, my parents, for all their flaws, both accepted their own responsibilities for the falling apart. I think it helps that they still loved each other deeply, they just weren't in love anymore. They have been friends since my mom was 2 and my dad was 3, started dating when mom was 12 and dad was 13. They separated at the ages of 49 and 50. It makes sense that they grew apart. I've had a few people ask why they divorced in the first place. My dad had a girlfriend for at least 15 years, possibly longer. My mom knew, but they agreed to not divorce until my younger brother had graduated high school. My dad got remarried to his girlfriend, my mom has also since remarried. All 4 of them get along famously now. The separation and divorce happened about 10 years ago. I'm very lucky to have 4 parents who care about me, and who absolutely adore my own little dudes. Friend was going through divorce from insane husband. He had been texting her pics of the gun he bought and threatening her. Police were called. Nothing they could do because it was only a picture. He was staying with a secret girlfriend at this point. She allowed him to go get his stuff from the house. She was scared to go back in the house alone. I went with her. First red flag was he had changed the locks. So we waited for locksmith to open the house and change the locks again. Well, when the door opens, we noticed all of the furniture was gone. So we carefully went upstairs in search of her cats. The entire second floor was empty. No cats. No furniture. Even her clothes were gone. Come to find out he hired a moving company to pack and take everything, even the food in the fridge. Finally found the cats. He had taken them to another vet in town and put them up for boarding under his sister's name thinking she would not be able to find them. He was finally forced to disclose what happened to her possessions. He had them taken to a storage unit far away from the home. Edit. I was quite rightly reminded that posting about an active file, even anonymously and on generic terms, is bad practice, so I removed that. I had one client who was controlling their spouse by keeping them addicted to meth. I fired them. My boss had a client who, well after we fired them, set themselves and their child on fire rather than give up custody. A few people have asked if the above was a specific case. I am ethically prohibited from confirming or denying, but this is sadly not a very unique event. There are lots of reported and unreported instances. None of these are that funny, I apologize, so here's my funny story. On the stand, my client and the other lawyer's client each spent about an hour saying I'm not lying, they're lying, then calling the other a bitch, asshole, goof, you name it. Often, using that phrase exactly. At one point one of them was cautioned by the judge for swearing and said fuck, sorry. The judge decided they were both not credible. Oh my lord, who the fuck would set their child on fire? Was the kid okay? Who the fuck would set their child on fire? Someone who views their kid as a pawn or a possession instead of a human being. It's horrifying that such people even exist. My uncle's ex tried to work it in that she would get half of whatever my grandmother would leave him when she passes. Joke's on her. My grandmother is passing over her kids, not maliciously. My uncle is very well off and so is my mom, and leaving everything to my brother and me. Oh, also tried to get sole custody of both of their children, who are in their 20s. I worked for a divorce attorney now, but the craziest thing came to my attention when I worked for the prosecuting attorney. This couple was breaking up and Mr. left the house. Mrs. went to work the next morning as usual. When she returned home in the evening she found Mr. had been to the house and removed his clothing and belongings as she expected. What she didn't expect was that he had also gorilla glued her belongings together. He glued the TV remote to the table, the phone to its cradle, the couch pillows to the couch and even glued the vacuum cleaner to the carpet. She called the police and reported this as property damage. The police went with her through the house documenting dozens of items glued to various things, but for days she was discovering random things and she would call to amend or update her report. My GD oven mitts were glued to the wall. Or he glued the effing sheets together in the linen closet. I've seen people do and say really awful things to each other, but that was diabolical. Wow. That's creative. Smart of her to call the police though. Documenting this upfront helps. I'm going to school to be a vet assistant. My teacher is a veterinarian. She told us on Monday she's had clients bring their animals in to be euthanized so their spouse couldn't have them. SMDH. Is it even fucking legal? Yes, It is. It isn't ethical though. Worked at an airport. Big burly guy brings an ugly ass dog in a crate to the counter. He is clearly misty-eyed. Turns out wife got the dog in the divorce and he has to send it to her, and she told him as soon as she gets it she is putting it down. He asks if he can have some time with the dog before the flight, so they go out in the grass and they both roll around in the grass, dog's tail just wagging away, not knowing anything about his future. The guy puts him back in the crate, drops him off the counter, says thanks, and then just walked out head down and just looking crushed. That was 30 years ago and I still remember it like it was yesterday. Who the fuck does that? I don't know. How can you go from loving somebody to that much hatred? So much so to murder an innocent dog. WTIF. I see a lot of unsubstantiated accusations of child abuse and/or molestation to deteriorate the relationship between dad and the kids. And we'll hire experts and therapists and there will be an investigation. We'll have depositions and a trial. And after a year has passed without dad being allowed to see his children and thousands of dollars have been spent, it will come out that nothing happened. This happens in my practice about once or twice a year. Very common. OMG. You got to the end. Like and subscribe. It's free and costs nothing, and it'd support a fellow human being / robot. Also, thank you to all the healthcare workers helping us and risking their lives. Peace out, homies.